What? You didn't say, I drink your milkshake.
I was going to say that part.
Oh, dang it. That wasn't even going to be my quote, but maybe you'll have a better impression than I did, Ryan. I want to hear yours.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.
It's that second one. Drink it up.
Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, like the script says, and then slurp really loudly and creepily.
Yeah, Ty, you thought our dad was bad? Holy crap.
So harsh. It's one of my favorite parts is the part where he takes in this kid, and it's like, oh man, I feel so guilty for this employee that died that I'm literally going to adopt his son, because otherwise he's an orphan. There's nowhere for him to go. Just the complete pure and goodness of the heart. Yep.
Oh, sorry. So I had it playing in the background just the beginning, because I've seen it 3 times, and because I keep falling asleep, so I'm like, if I just play in the background, maybe I can do other things. All the, like, business ordeals, like, it was just stressing me out. Like, the guy's like, everybody wants his money.
Boogie Nights.
That just has, like, 2 amazing scenes. And that whole play out when he's throwing the firecrackers, that whole scene.
Boogie Nights was a number of years ago for me, and the scene that I remember the most from that is when the husband goes off the deep end at the end of the movie.
Oh, yeah. That was sad. That's why you don't date stars. 2.5 hours is long.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into my my answer to Jordan, in that 100% of the people that watched it with me did not like it. Because those people would be my wife and my wife's best friend, and they were not a fan of the feel of this movie. You know, they're more fans of things like The Notebook, so when it goes the way this did... I think that in terms of the crony capitalism, it just barely touched on that, but what it did do is it showed, that one guy who's just full tilt, out to succeed at all costs, willing to compromise his morals, but just cutthroat, and he did what he had to do to get ahead and get ahead of everybody. I would do slit your throat. I told you what I would do. Well, that was something, too, that I was disappointed. I was like, usually this guy follows through, and he totally never did that. Well, that's actually a point I wanted to bring up, because the great thing about this is you see Daniel Day-Lewis's character progress from what seems to be a legitimate business person, but just, like, really determined, to an absolute psychopath. And they do leave a lot of things open-ended. I mean, I gotta give it to them. I appreciate the fact that there's plenty in this movie that you can debate about. You mentioned to me offline that, you'd want to talk about, did he really love his son? Yes or no? And there's so much to explore there. But also, like, at the very end, not to skip right to the end, but, the very last line in the movie, I'm finished. You kind of wonder, is he saying to the butler, I'm finished, like my life and career is done? Or is he just like, I'm done murdering this guy, please clean up? Because how many guys has he murdered in that house over the years? Is the butler just like used to it? Oh, okay, I guess I'll clean up now.
Well, okay, and you said at the beginning he wasn't, I'm not so sure he wasn't insane.
That's where I feel like it gives a good start of him being the underdog. It's showing that he's the one doing the work, he's the one injured, he's pulling himself, there's no one there to help him, he's all by himself, going from that basically lowest possible point to being, the millionaire. That's the character growth.
And the other little part that made me think he was insane was when he was talking to Paul Dano and he said, if there isn't oil in the hills, he's like, I will come back for my money and more.
I'll
like
take
him
more
saying,
than my money.
Yes.
The low-key threat. Like, you're wasting my time trying to con me.
And wait, I was also confused. So Paul Dano, he has a brother and it's Paul Dano?
Eli.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That explains it. Because that's one of the things that me and my wife were all confused about. We were like, what, isn't this the same guy? Like,
yeah, that's what
here?
I kept saying. I'm like, wait a minute.
I was like, he meets Eli, and I was like, oh, I see. They're pretending to meet each other for the first time to keep up the act, even though it's just him and his son there. But, like, whatever. And also the reveal at the end where he says, like, I gave $10,000 to your brother, and he has a successful business now. And it kind of is like the equalizing factor to say, well, they were identical twins, and maybe there's some personality differences, but otherwise, they come from exactly the same starting point. So Eli could have made different decisions.
Well, and it completely changes their motivations, because when he was like at the dinner table, like crawling across the table and attacking his father, I thought he was just, I just thought he was upset
that was weird
because
it's like, you're the one brought him here,
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm like, oh, but you brought him here, and Is it because he
Yeah.
backstabbed you that you're upset now, and so you're taking it out on your dad?
Yeah. That, I think, is the first scene where we get confirmation that Eli is such a hypocrite, because he's all about being a healer and being good, being spiritual, and then he's like, I'm gonna abuse my dad. That's wrong, man.
And wait, was that lady? I couldn't really tell. Was she cured of her palsy, or what? Or we did not see it. We didn't even see it.
We don't get any conversation. Yeah, no confirmation. It's just straight up a scene from the evangelical churches.
Okay,
That's
because
all there is.
I was wondering, like, oh, does he actually have power? Well, not, I don't know about power, but I thought he had seen it, and so he was like, maybe there's something more to this guy, because he just seems in so denial and like did not care for this guy or his church.
I think the very first like huge kick in the is where Eli asks, "Hey, this is where you'll call me up to give the blessing," and he's just like, "And now let's bless this," and says a prayer, and it's like, "Yep, too bad, Eli." Well, you gotta wonder too, like maybe did Eli like do some sabotage in there because of that?
Did he actually give his brother $10,000? I thought he was just saying that he didn't actually do it because I thought he was
did.
backstabbing. He did do it. Okay, I thought he was backstabbing everybody.
Yeah, and you know, I wasn't surprised that he kind of snubbed Eli in terms of the blessing, because for Eli to come up and be like, "Hey, I think I should give a blessing," you kind of immediately get that feeling. If you're the one that's like gone and done all that work, and Eli comes up out of nowhere and he's like, "I'll give the blessing," it's kind of like you're trying to steal the credit that all this work I've done, you're gonna give some blessing, and it's gonna be like, "Oh, everything that good that happens from that point on is because of you, and therefore it's totally propping up your church." It's just a complete handout.
And it was so perfect that the guy died the same day that he didn't give the blessing. I just like, oh my gosh, like,
The fire.
was that real? That looks so real.
It's a good combination of CGI and practical effects.
Okay.
That's how you make something look really good.
It looks so good. And the music adds to that.
That was good.
So cool.
I wanted to use this as a jumping off point. Does he love his son? I believe there are a number of points in the movie, this being one of them, where it shows you that he does. But it's complicated and nuanced because he loves his son from having raised him for that amount of time, and he goes and gets him. He runs toward the danger to first rescue him, then get him to safety, and only after he's safe go back and be concerned about the actual structure. That's one example.
Yes. And then the other flashback when after he tells the guy, I mean, you're not my son, the guy that was translating, and then he leaves, he has that flashback of him taking care of the kid. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So here's the thing. I think that specific flashback was intentional to show us that, hey, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. He did actually do things that, you know, would have been kind of too much of a pre-reveal if it had been chronologically. And so by jumping back to that, it showed, okay, yeah, maybe he didn't love him.
Well, and it's much more real. I mean, the reason that the Punisher TV series drive me so crazy is because every flashback was like the perfect dream-like and they're all happy.
Yeah. Another example, I think for me the biggest example that showed that he loved his son was how after he abandoned him, and he finally, you know, owned up to it, they show it where he's receiving the child, gets off the train, he's out in whatever, the dirt by the railroad track, and he gives his son a hug or whatever, and the son just like starts swinging at him because he's so angry. And the dad or whatever, Daniel Day-Lewis's character, he doesn't like get angry with the kid. He just stays remorseful, and he sort of just like tries to calm the kid down and just, you know, make it better. Maybe cinematically speaking, that was supposed to be a metaphor. Maybe that was symbolic of the fact that the main character had to sort of like emotionally distance himself so that he could accept what he had done and he could receive the son back without having it be this huge emotional scene. That's another great quote too, where he's like, "I'm tired of dealing with these people," and he just laughs, you know, where it's like, they can barely be called people.
I thought he didn't know his brother.
He said, "I just don't care anymore," right? So his fake brother said, "I don't care anymore." And I feel like this was a huge miss in the movie, where they should have developed this a little further, that the main character is just staring off, and it's kind of like he's trying to process what his brother's reaction is. And I thought what was going on was he was having some introspection finally, and he was going to maybe have a turning point where, as much as he's been chasing success, he can see that it's not motivating his brother, and so maybe he's got his priorities out of whack and he's chasing the wrong thing, whereas he's chasing financial success instead of happiness specifically. And I thought that his brother being like, not excited by any of it was going to start to spur that along. But they didn't explore that at all. And he's like, I need some more money. And like, well, this isn't going to go well.
Just really quick, I thought he said, because he came to him, and he made it sound like he had no idea he had a brother. So that expression, how would he have known it?
You mean with the dance?
He said to him...
No, the liquored up and go to the dance?
Okay, that phrase is when he realized it wasn't him. How do you think he figured that out? I thought he didn't even know he had a brother, so how could he remember anything they had said to each other? He's like, I have a brother? Like, it made it sound like he had never even known about it.
Yeah, because especially the guy came up and he was like, I'm your brother from another mother. So it's like, did he even know?
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying that expression, him realizing it, just doesn't make sense to me. Like, maybe it's from where he grew up, because it just doesn't make sense because they didn't know each other. I think
that's just another one of the ambiguous things they threw in, that you could say maybe that's where he discovered it versus maybe he figured it out at the fire.
Yeah.
I thought that was the point where he was like, what could have happened to my brother that would cause him to be like this? He's nothing like I remember. So here's what my biggest gripe is, because I know you want to transition at some point to gripes, but this is my biggest gripe in the movie, is that they did such a good job of leaving certain things ambiguous that you can really talk about it, but they should have just left whether or not he was a brother ambiguous. Like, he confesses at the fire. He shouldn't have confessed. It should have been him being like, no, I'm your brother. And then, like, Daniel Plainview is just like, I don't believe you. Bang.
Yeah, and then there could have been all sorts of theories whether or not he was.
Yes, and that would have been something that the character Daniel Plainview could have had to live with the rest of his life. Like,
not knowing.
Was he really my brother?
Yeah.
I don't know. Did I kill my brother? Or was it an imposter? I think the fact that H.W. tried burning the guy in his sleep is more a testament to that he figured something out from the diary, and less a testament of him just being, like, crazy. I'm going to give you one thing here, and then I'm going to move to kind of the more nuanced opinion that I have. So another thing that I thought indicated that he loved his son was that when he was in the restaurant and he was ordering food for them, and he said, and a water for my son, and a milk for my son. I was like, he's at least thinking about him enough to, like, order him some milk. But then I remembered the previous scene earlier where he's almost, like, force-feeding the kid milk. And it's more like he thinks that the milk is healthy for the kid, and so he wants the kid to just drink it! So, I don't know. That's kind of debatable. But one of the things that... So here's the nuanced version. All right. I think, honestly, he grew to love the boy. He may have initially adopted him out of the goodness of his heart. He may have initially adopted him out of strategy, but he grew fond of the son because he's like, we don't know at what point he realized he was, but he's like, this is my son. I need to have someone carry on my legacy, which also explains why he was so pissed that the son at the end, like, wanted to start his own company instead of just continuing to be a partner and take it over. But, like, I think he grew to love him. However, when the accident happened that took away H.W.'s hearing, that was a turning point that he started to become a burden. And over the years, he grew to resent the boy more and more. And so the love faded away to resentment. And that's why he exploded so much at the end. Once H.W. was like, I'm going to go away. And he's like, well, you're going to be my competitor then. And that's why he totally burned that bridge. Because by that point, he was just full of resentment of his son. But earlier on in the movie, he clearly loved him. He saved him. He looked out for him first and then the structure. And even after that, when he was trying to help him get his hearing back, he was like, we're going to find a doctor. We're going to find a teacher. You can learn sign language or whatever. When are you going to come heal my boy? So he clearly cares about the kid then. And there's that scene that's even in the trailer where he's like, they're laying down together and he's holding him. And so clearly he loved him at one point, and I think it just gradually changed to resentment. There's so many times in life where people have an argument and you say things you don't mean. And so clearly that's a point where maybe some of that was from a foundation of reality, but again, it could be simply a moment where he was saying really mean things because he was just really aggravated at the slap in the face that he just got. So I think it's more nuanced. I think he loved him originally, and he just grew to resent him because of that.
I was just curious, too, if you guys had any ideas what he whispered to Dano after he was just slapped a bunch of times in the church.
Yeah, is it more extortion?
Wait a minute. So okay, just clearing up the brothers really quick. So the very beginning was he gave the brother $500, and then he gave $1,000, and then he gave an additional $1,000.
Ultimately, he gave him $10,000.
So he gave $10,000 to the first brother, And then he wanted
Yeah,
more.
and then comes back like, I have sinned.
And after the mission, he came and wanted more money. That's who we're talking about.
Yeah, Eli.
Yes, right? Okay.
I like when Daniel Plainview asks him to confess, and Eli's initial reaction, the way the actor portrayed this, the one that played Eli, where he's just like, well, I could say that, but it wouldn't be true. And you're like, do you believe that, or are you just totally messing around here? There's a good number of actors, though, that they, insist on changing the name of the character to be their first name, which is probably, I mean, it may sometimes be an ego thing, but I think a lot of times, too, it's also just to help them stay in character so that they're not, like, being called by a different name. So I'm a convert. I was raised Catholic, and one of my favorite movies back in the day was Dogma, because they did such a great job of, like, taking the Catholic faith and, like, poking at all the holes and just, like, comically portraying everything. It was great. I mean, George Carlin, that was fantastic.
We had a seminary teacher. He showed us a scene from Dogma from our church. He's like, I don't watch rated R movies, but I'm going to show you the scene from a rated R movie. I'm like, what?
People got stories about that. I remember in high school, we had a high school teacher that showed us some movie, and it was supposed to, like, accurately portray the relationship between, the first settlers and the Native Americans. And he was like, now there's a scene in here that I have to make sure to skip. And it was like, it was portraying, and he ended up very accidentally not skipping that scene, and miraculously was not fired.
That's great.
I abandoned my boy. That was great because that was simultaneously annoying to see Eli succeed over him, but also good to finally see Daniel Plainview breaking down and admitting that he totally abandoned him, because like he sits down on the train and you can tell by the way he's acting, and you're like, wait, he's just gonna walk off, isn't he? And you know what, in support of your opinion, he did do a good job of showing no emotion when he was just walking into his car, the
he
whole
looked
time
like he was in pain a little bit, though. He was gritting his teeth. That was my favorite. When he was confessing, you saw like a slew of emotions. It was like it went from like anger to sadness back and forth. He was also confessing to the fact that he left his son. Like, I'm just saying he still felt guilt about leaving his son.
Dude, and sometimes in movies, there's amazing stuff that happens just purely coincidentally, and they're like, this was gold. Well, and there's so many foreshadowings of that. Like, that's part of the character progression that we see of Daniel Plainview, is that he's just, like, goes more and more psychotic. Like, what? He just flipped out. The guy's like, I don't know, take care of your son. And he's like, what did you just say? Did you just tell me how to run my family? Dude. And then he goes crazy on him a second time when they're just trying to eat in that restaurant. I love that line, because he is so much the fool in there, and he's like, you look like a fool.
You didn't see Abraham Lincoln? I thought you saw Lincoln.
Lincoln? Actually, I haven't seen Lincoln either, and I really want to see that.
Last of the Mohicans, I think, is my favorite. Well, second favorite, because this performance obviously trumps all. Oh, Gangs of New York was good.
I haven't seen that either.
I think he had so much fun doing this part. Like,
It's a fairly good comparison, yeah. Yeah. Social Network, but just like a century earlier. So I gotta say, my favorite scene from Social Network is where they're in there with the lawyers, and he's like, you have 1% of my, I forget the line, but like, I'll give you the minimal amount of my attention. This is a waste of my time. Well, it's funny, too, because people say, like, he's constantly portrayed as this robotic figure, and there's definitely things that he does, but there are people who have had a chance to, like, actually sit down casually with him, and they're like, he's a pretty normal guy, but only in a certain setting. I feel like whenever he feels like he's being watched, he makes, like, the minimalist gestures, because he's like, I can't give anybody anything to hold on to make fun of me. This is how a normal person drinks water. The only element of it that wasn't essentially fair is, like, there was nobody witnessing it. It was just the two of them. It's not like when Plainview had to confess in front of the whole congregation. So nobody heard Eli be like, I'm a false prophet. To be fair, it was less fair to Eli overall, gotta say.
There was no pan, and you never saw the butler's face again, though, when he walked into the room.
Yeah, we never got a true reaction. He didn't, once he walked far enough that you feel like he could have seen what was going on, you didn't see a reaction, and that was my indicator of like, I feel like this has happened before. But, so my answer to your question, though, is I feel like they wrote that intentionally so that it could be both ways. And the only place that I've seen that before done so well was actually in Superman Returns, my favorite scene of Superman Returns, where what was it? Like, think the baby did something like the baby expressed some sort of power.
Through a piano?
Yeah, with the piano. And so
Yeah.
like Lex Luthor he asked Lois Lane, or no, it was the guy on the intercom was like, "We've arrived at our destination," and that was right in the middle of the conversation. So Lex Luthor asked her, "Are you sure? Essentially, are you sure that's, the right father?" And so when he asks, "Are you sure?" He's asking Lois, but then it's the guy over the intercom that's like, "Yes, we've arrived at our destination."
I liked your guys' thoughts. Like, I had not thought about this movie that much until we've discussed it. Like, I'm very happy we're discussing it because it's a good movie, but it's a very slow burn. Like,
it is slow. It's definitely
literally
a movie made by guys for guys. There's no scenes where you really get the feels. It's just like dry and then like violent and then more dry and serious. Like, not much happiness.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of what was the Stanley Kubrick, Barry Lyndon, how in the end he was just kind of alone. And that's what I thought when he was in the building, his giant mansion, all alone shooting things. It was a perfect portrayal of, once you've gained all the wealth in the world, like, for what? Like,
yeah.
You have nothing. Like, you have everything, and yet the interesting thing is it was so empty. It was just filled with nothing.
Yeah. I didn't think of it as Daniel represented anything like hellish or demonistic, but I thought of it as like, I felt like Eli just put on this huge performance, and like while I was watching it, I was like, okay, this is very evangelical, and he does that huge performance, and to me, Daniel Plainview is there just being like, you're such a fraud. You're just totally acting all this up. You're playing it up. I just thought it was funny because there was that such a performance from Eli, and then it just cuts to Daniel, and it's like, I am not amused.
Eli, they're both demons, dude.
But they're almost foils. They're like demonistic in a different way.
Yeah. Even when the church kicked him out, he still believed he was a prophet. It's a great movie. I was just wondering how much oil they were losing. I'm like,
Yeah. All right, so just last night I finally finished the third season of The Orville. That has been
I love
a
Orville.
big show for me. I'm a huge fan. Like, I've always loved sci-fi stuff, and I've enjoyed Seth MacFarlane's stuff. When I was in high school, I was a big fan of Family Guy, and I know they've been making more seasons since then, and I just haven't kept up on it. But I had learned enough about him to understand that he was a huge fan of Star Trek. So to see what he's been able to do in making that kind of a universe his own. They did a great job, great visual effects. The characters are all very compelling, and the relationships, and each episode, the writing is perfect in my opinion. They explore these sensitive issues, and they give absolutely the right amount of credence to each side, and they write it in such a way that it's very debatable, and it's very almost puts you in the other person's shoes. So I'm a huge fan of every one of these
I almost
episodes.
like it better than Star Trek because, like,
Yeah.
Star Trek is almost a little too serious and too cheesy.
Yes.
Well, this,
Yeah.
like, leans into that. It's like,
it's got the
we
college
know we're
humor
cheesy.
mixed in
Yes.
with that universe.
Yeah. Wait, I'm curious. The third season, is it as good as the first two? I really enjoyed those.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It did not disappoint. They just moved forward, continuing the storyline, and they explored new additional social issues. And they did a great job.
And is that on Paramount Plus?
It's on Hulu. That's where I watched it.
Hulu, sorry. Okay.
Yep. And something coming up that I want to see. It's actually out already, but Everything Everywhere All at Once. From what I hear, that's going to be something I'll really enjoy.
Did you see Swiss Army Man?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh, it was their first film, so that was a good one too.
Okay. I saw the trailers for that, and I thought it just looked really weird.
Yes.
That's all I can think of right now. I've seen a bunch recently. I'm always a fan of the Marvel movies, although I've been disappointed with everything since Endgame.
Yeah.
Like, how do you top that? You can't. It's something that takes like over a decade to build up to, and then it's like every superhero in every movie leading up to it, and then it's like, okay, we defeated the super big bad guy. And then now we're gonna explore all these little side stories where it's like, really. So I mean, I've watched everything, all the
Don't
Marvel
get Ty
stuff
started.
on Disney Plus. I've watched all the Star Wars stuff, but yeah, I've gone back and I've rewatched Endgame and I've rewatched Infinity Wars, and I'm like, these movies are amazing. These are great.
Yeah, you can keep. Ty could talk about that stuff for hours.
Yeah, another podcast, my friend.
Yes.
I am a ghost. I've got nothing out there publicly yet. Maybe someday.
Bye.
We're finished.